If you are watching this, then it is possible. It just might be that you are one of that rarest of breeds, that strange animal, that creature that is willing to give a chance to an obscure, a black and white science fiction movie from Czechoslovakia just because some strange guy on the internet has told you that it is really, really super cool. Well, if that is you, my wonderful friend, I have some fantastic news for you because that movie does exist and I am that strange guy. My name is Christian Malte and the movie is called Krakatit. Krakatit from 1948, the first science fiction masterpiece from the atomic era. Who says that? I say that. That's right. I checked. Okay? Atomic Era, 1945, an epoch-shattering event. And obviously we have lots of science fiction movies that came after that were trying to, cope with the magnitude of what had happened, this power of destruction and all the whole thing. So we have movies like Them or Planet of the Apes or Doctor Strangelove. A lot of very, very, very good movie with the first one. If you go for instance, on my Letterboxd list of all the science fiction movies, I'll put the list if you're curious. Doesn't matter. The first one, the first really, really, really awesome one is this one. Story is very simple. Starts with a scientist. We find out pretty quickly he's a scientist. He's dazed and he's confused and he's obviously been in a horrible accident. He's barely walking and somebody saves him, takes him to a doctor. And he goes into a coma, essentially a coma, and he has a fever dream. This is mentioned quite often when people talk about the story of this movie. The whole movie is a fever dream. This guy's fever dream, Dr. Prokop, his name is, like the cafe in France. He's invented this explosive, the most powerful explosive in the history of planet Earth. The hallucinations he has are kind of like almost a Last Temptation of Christ thing, except in a science fiction setting. So he will imagine what happens if he does go on with his experiments, or essentially he will imagine like all the world's powers and the spies, going after him, and he'll fall in love a couple of times, and many, 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 many things will happen. Very interesting things will happen because ultimately the movie, as it evolves, it turns into a very interesting allegory, which I will mention by the end. I'm usually, let's say I'm 50-50 on allegories, but this one was a really good one. So anyway, let's start with the obvious qualities of the movie. It looks like I don't know what the monetary unit in Czechoslovakia was in 1948, but like 1,000,000 kopecks. It looks fantastic. The director is named Otakar Vavra. He was a very well-known Czech director. He worked all the way, I think, through certainly the 80s, because he actually did a remake of this very movie in 1980. The movie was called Dark Sun, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, Otakar Vavra, he's a little bit controversial from what I've seen because he was very friendly with the communist authorities. So some people don't look too kindly on that. I don't know. I mean, he's directed a lot of movies that look really cool. I don't know about the whole political thing, but I do know that he's a really, really good director. I mean, he just is. Just as a side note, the movie was also the first AD, essentially, like the assistant director is Jindřich Polák. the director of like a slew of massively super cool Czech science fiction movies. Most notably, one of my all-time favorites from every country, the glorious Ikari XB1. So the director of that, Jędrek Polak, he was the assistant director on Krakatit. And as I mentioned, it just looks fantastic. It looks like, first of all, it looks like what you would expect for a film noir, for instance. And in terms of the story, there are elements of a film noir or a 40s spy movie. It's hugely atmospheric. The sets are fantastic. The lights are fantastic. And towards the end, as we go into the more, as I mentioned, allegorical, dimension of the movie, they look like dream sequences almost. Or the short version is that it looks really cool. It reminded me of the old Fritz Lang Dr. Mabuse movies, especially like the first the silent one and the 1930s one. So it has some of that. Reminded me also of DOA, both the 50s version, 50s I think, yes, the black and white version, and in fact the remake, because of the story. A very cool movie, the remake. I was even reminded watching this in terms of the atmospherics and the visuals, but like a sense of like the feel of it. I was even reminded of Jim Jarmusch's Dead Man. So that is to say that this is fantastic. It leans more towards like obviously the European. It's more Fritz Lang than Jim Jarmusch, but it's fantastic, and lots of montage elements, like classic, like 1930s overlays, a few montage sequences. Anyway, so as a movie buff, as a person who appreciates like the beauty of the actual language and grammar of cinema, although Martin Scorsese pure cinema thing, that's one of those. Like this is super cool on that level. Furthermore, I mentioned the whole film noir spy stuff. Well, right off the bat, the movie begins with a guy, stumbling in the mists of, I think it's Prague. Anyway, the mystery, the suspense, fantastic. Like the atmosphere is this thick, it's super cool, it's wonderful, works really well. You are curious for basically the first half hour as to what is actually going on, like how much is he delirious? Are we actually seeing stuff that's happening or that did happen? How much is a flashback? How much is a hallucination? And the movie quite skillfully straddles that line. It has an amnesia, like basic story element. It relies on that because at the beginning, the main character doesn't know really who he is, comes back to him. So in a sense, it's obviously being seen a lot, the amnesiac main character, but it just works super well, not only in general, but here. And by the time, eventually he gets captured by a world of power. And so then it kind of switches, and as it progresses, there's the whole, there's a political allegory which is very smart. There's a very interesting detail with the cast of very old money, essentially. Like they're nobles with the medals. Like they look like Prussian officers, really. That's what they are. They're Prussian and a Russian and everything you want. They're these old royalty and princes and generals and arms salesmen. Because they're in it for the money, really. Anyway, but there's a sequence where all these people they're trying to woo our scientist and to promise him all these riches, right? If he gives them the secret of his of his explosive, and he plays ball, and they have this guy there, and he's going on about the master race essentially, and he's obviously a Hitler character. But they're watching and yeah, do you like this guy? We found him. We just left for a while, whatever. It will use him to manipulate the masses essentially. But it shows like the cynicism of the whole thing, and reminded me, in fact, of the Peter Watkins movie on that theme, which is called Gladiator 1 or Gladiator, something like that. Very cool movie as well. We might mention it on this channel eventually because I like Peter Watkins a lot. But anyway, what they do with that is super interesting. It was very well observed, very smart, very funny even. Anyway, but that's when the movie starts to turn into this allegory and it goes from the spy stuff, atmospheric stuff, and it becomes more suspenseful, and then it finally turns into this allegory. So it's very well made, and it's super effective, and as I mentioned, it's beautifully shot. It's just magnificently well executed, so that helps. So the story is great, the atmosphere is great, it's all great. And I will mention, like I said, I mentioned the allegorical aspect of the movie, and so it shows off, I will semi-spoil it, okay? There's tiny, but there's this kind of femme fatale character. I won't say who she is, but there is a sort of femme fatale character, and she's wearing a dress, and the dress has a sort of strange belt in the form of a snake. But that happens around minute 40, 50, like the middle of the movie essentially. So you notice it, but it's only at the end that really the movie cashes that check, if you like, because by that time there is a character, again, I won't spoil it, but there is a character which who has a name which is pretty transparently allegorical. By that time, it's not subtle, and the movie transforms into a sort of rewriting of the 40 days in the desert sequence of Jesus's life, right? Also, he's tempted by the devil, and he promises earthly power if he only will, that whole thing. Christ allegories are hard to pull off. It's very easy to be heavy-handed with that, and that's because quite often, obviously, they focus on the Christ aspect, like, oh, the Son of God, like a la Dark City, if you like, or The Matrix, that sort of thing. And I have nothing against it. Those are very cool movies, very, very cool movies, but still, that's usually what you see. Whereas here, we have exactly, transparently, the same episode being replayed, but it's really more about the temptation, and he does have power, except it's not Christ-like powers, but it is God-like powers, the God-like powers of the power of destruction of the atomic age, right? And he has it, he wields it, which obviously is the big epochal part of the change that has occurred since the beginning of the nuclear age. That's the thing. We've harnessed the power of the essential, basic foundational thingies of the universe, and we can blow up the whole planet with it. It's a big deal. It's a big deal, and it's devastating and frightening. But you can also create, in theory, you can do peaceful things with it, So the movie is about that, and it uses the Christ allegory to think about that, and well, it's godlike powers. So you're allowed to do it, okay? And I think it does it. The movie does it pretty well, and by the end, it also. Final thing I will say, it had it reminded me of a Twilight Zone episode, but that's not spoiling anything. It's just saying that it had kind of that feel, like the flavor of it, not because of a twist or nothing like that, but the black and white aspect, the allegorical aspect, and the general vibe of it. It had the Twilight Zone flavor, which obviously, being a huge Twilight Zone fan, I enjoyed very much. A little bit of trivia before we conclude our little episode today. First of all, Krakatit. Where does that name come from? It comes from Krakatoa, the volcano, because volcano, explosion, big, powerful. So that's the name he uses for his explosive, Dr. Prokop. I mentioned the remake, Dark Sun. Curious to see it. Checked just a few minutes just to get an idea. It doesn't look as good as this one, to be honest. It's more like the language is different, but I'm still curious. And finally, last but not least, so our Dr. Prokop, he's operated on by a doctor, very competent, very good doctor, and he's operated on, and I'm pretty sure the operation he gets is a spinal tap. Yes. It looks pretty much exactly like that. It sounds like that's what it is. So, I'm not a medical expert. I don't even play one on TV, but I'm pretty sure it's the only science fiction movie I've seen where the main character undergoes an actual Spinal Tap Stonehenge. So that's it for today. I have a Patreon if you want to support my work or follow me, especially because YouTube. It's anyway. 'Tis but a shadow of its former self. Still, I love you. You're great. Keep watching the skies. Live long and prosper. And if you check the movie, let me know. Take care. Bye.